All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brianna Yoakum. I'm the coordinator, accreditation coordinator, and also work in assisting with these professional development webinars. So we just, on behalf of Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences, we welcome you and our presenters here today. So I just want to remind you guys, we do have a pretty full house today. So if everyone can keep themselves on mute, that would be great so that we could effectively hear Garrett. I'm also going to be monitoring the chat for questions, and then Garrett as well is going to leave some time at the end to take questions. So and then after the presentation today, I'm going to send you all the slides that Garrett is going to be sharing with us today, so you guys have them. And then also I have a short survey. If you guys have a minute to fill that out, it'd be really great just to help us improve. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Garrett. Garrett Costin. He's a LICSW and a SUDPT, and Garrett has started his social work career with migrant and refugee communities on the Thailand-Myanmar border in 2009. And since returning to the US in 2014, he's gained valuable experience working in both inpatient and outpatient behavioral health and medical settings. He currently serves as the behavioral health consultant, facilitating workshops and training on person-centered and trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing skills, medications for opioid use disorder, and other topics. And he is energized by innovative person-centered initiatives that aim to reduce disparities and inequities in healthcare and society. And that's also listed in the chat if you wanted to read it again. So thank you, Garrett, so much for being here today. We're so excited that we have such a big group of people, and we're looking forward to hearing you share on motivational interviewing.
Thank you, Brianna. It's my pleasure to be here with you all. I see a couple of you that I recognize from the mindfulness webinar a month ago. So I guess we did an okay job that you felt like giving us another 90 minutes of your time today. I saw a question from someone in the chat box if there would be closed captions for this webinar. I know that Zoom can do that, where it's a pretty good approximation of what is said. But Brianna, is that something that we're able to turn on or activate today?
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Garrett, I'm looking through our Zoom settings now to see if I can figure out how to toggle that on.
Okay, so we'll do our best. All right, so thank you for the introduction. This is my fifth presentation for this group, for Walker, for the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences, and all of you, operators, managers, and staff and peers at recovery residences. Our topic for today is about motivational interviewing, which is an approach to conversations for positive change. And we're going to be talking about some techniques and skills for effective recovery conversations. Before we begin, I want to give a little disclaimer or transparency statement that this morning's session, what we're doing today for the next hour and a half, is not a clinical training in theories of behavioral change techniques or in motivational interviewing. That simply would not be possible in just one introductory session. Becoming proficient in motivational interviewing skills typically requires about 20 or 30 hours of live instruction and practice, and then many months of practice with folks, with individuals in treatment settings. So what this presentation is an introduction for folks who are curious to learn a bit more about motivational interviewing, this approach that's been found to be very effective and well received for individuals, helping them increase their motivation for positive change. And we're going to be watching a few examples, a few short videos of motivational interviewing in action. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do any role plays or simulations. We just won't have time for that today. But my intention is that you'll all leave feeling confident that you have a solid understanding of what motivational interviewing is, the principles and the mindset that we bring to motivational interviewing, as well as some skills and techniques that you can start trying out in conversations with that happen in your recovery residences. And hopefully you'll be able to determine for yourself if motivational interviewing is something that you're interested in learning more about, or seeking out some additional training in. So that being said, this is our plan for this morning. We're going to start by, I'm going to give you a brief sketch of my background in motivational interviewing, what I'm bringing to this webinar today. And then we will look at some definitions of what motivational interviewing is and is not. I'll cover the history and some of the applications of motivational interviewing. Then we'll go into the spirit of motivational interviewing, the 4 elements of the spirit, and then the 4 core skills, what we call the ORs: open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And we always get squeezed for time towards the end, but it's in the slides that everyone will get. I hope we have time to look at a couple of tools that can assist you in having more effective recovery conversations. And then we'll review some resources, and my goal is by 11:15 we get to the question and answer and discussion portion. Before I move on, I want to just make a couple notes about terminology. For the most part, I'm going to use the abbreviation MI to refer to motivational interviewing. MI is going to be drilled into your head by the end of this. Also, when I may, and it's in the slides, use the terms client or individual in recovery, or even patient in some of the videos. You can just consider those all synonyms for resident or person in recovery. And when you hear the terms clinician or interviewer, that is synonymous with staff. Okay, so moving on, Brianna gave you a little bio of myself. This one focuses more on my background in motivational interviewing. It started while I was doing my master's in social work at the University of Washington. And in 2015, I was awarded a fellowship. It was a fellowship to become very proficient and skilled in what is known as SBIRT, or screening, brief intervention, and referral for treatment. And as part of that fellowship, I had the opportunity to get intensive training in motivational interviewing for a whole year. Then, as part of my internship, while I was still a student at the University of Washington, throughout the beginning of my career in the field, I had the opportunity for several years to utilize and build my motivational interviewing skills with both outpatient and inpatient clients in treatment settings. And for a little more than a year of that, I actually became the staff development lead for motivational interviewing at Valley City's Behavioral Health for the Rainier Beach Clinic. So I was responsible for training other staff and peers at the clinic in motivational interviewing skills. And most recently, until last year, I was also an instructor in motivational interviewing for Valley Medical Center and their health coach program. So I have experience applying motivational interviewing approaches in case management, mental health, addiction, and primary care or medical settings. And I'm a big proponent, a big booster of motivational interviewing, because I've experienced myself the transformative power and the benefits of these techniques. I would really like to see motivational interviewing even more broadly adopted and practiced in recovery settings. And that's why I'm excited to be asked to do this presentation. This MI conversations are quite different from standard or old-fashioned top-down, sort of I'm the expert and you need to listen to me. You need to change because I'm telling you, and you need to do it in this way. It's very different from those types of conversations because of the primary focus on respecting and doing our best to fully understand the individual's choices and their ways of seeing things, and respecting where they're at their change journey. So that being said, I'd like to give you the opportunity to share your experience or your opinions about motivational interviewing. If you have them, this may be your first time hearing and learning about MI. I bet it's not the first time that you've heard or been part of an MI conversation, although you might not have been aware. So if you'd like to enter in the chat box any of your experiences or opinions to date with MI. And also, if you'd like to take a stab at defining or describing MI in your own words before we take a look at my definition. And while I give everybody a minute to get their responses in, I'd like to just talk about why it's called motivational interviewing. What is this interviewing? The motivational part is pretty easy to understand. The goal of motivational interviewing is to uncover and then increase and utilize an individual's own internal motivation for positive change. We believe that everyone has that inside themselves somewhere. Everyone has an instinct to survive and to improve their health and their quality of life, regardless of their current behavior. So that's the motivational part. And the interviewing, I feel that that's sort of not the ideal term to use, interviewing, because it makes it sound like we're just asking a lot of questions to the other person, trying to get information or interrogating them. But this use of the term interviewing in MI is really getting at interviewing in terms of exploring a topic together, looking at a focused topic together and trying to learn more, sharing our information and doing our best to explore a topic together. Okay, Brianna, can you share a little bit of what's in the chat box? I think only 3 responses, but maybe there's something interesting in there.
Stephanie says, meeting people where they're at and encouraging and empowering them to advocate for their needs. And yes. Anna says, identify strengths and goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on my end.
Okay, that's great. A lot of those terms are spot on. Motivational interviewing is definitely a strengths-based approach, and empowerment of the individual, of the resident, is definitely one of the main goals and purposes of motivational interviewing. We want to use MI to build up a person's confidence and awareness of their strengths and the skills that they have to be successful as they embark on the first steps for positive change.
Some more coming in here. I have reflective listening, Katie says. Brooks, I've been exposed to it as a young counselor, and then working with progress goal attainment program. So powerful when a client sets their own goals. Shannon was new and just want to be a motivator at my job as a case manager. And then discovering an individual's strengths, hot buttons that motivate them to positive change that you can help with.
Yes, great. Thank you, everyone who responded. It sounds like we have a range of experience levels with MI, so that's great. And the comment that was about, it's so powerful when you get a client to come up with and state their own goals that they've come up with. Yes, that's absolutely true and real. That's, I think, what really convinces people that MI is worth learning and applying is when you see the impact it can have on a client. There's an old adage that goes along the lines of human beings listen to about 20% of what other people tell them, but we listen and we believe to about 100% of what we say ourselves. So if we can pull out and uncover and amplify a person's own internal motivation and reasons for change and confidence in change, and have them state that themselves, that is so much more impactful. So here is a very simple definition of MI. Motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style to increase or strengthen a person's own motivation for and commitment to healthy change. That is about the most succinct, simple definition I can come up with. Now we're going to take a look at a couple of different examples of change conversations. This first one, actually, both of these conversations focus on, she seems to be a social worker or case manager in a primary care setting. And she's talking with this individual, the man in the black, about his asthma and the fact that, and what might be exacerbating his asthma symptoms. The focus is on his dog, and that the social worker believes that he really needs to get rid of his dog because the dog is making his asthma worse. If we can imagine that the focus is actually marijuana or anything else that you would smoke rather than the dog, this will be more applicable for our field. And just a disclaimer, this first conversation is not one that I'm encouraging you to try to put into your own practice. We're gonna compare two versions of this conversation. Here's the first one. Might have to make it a little smaller. Here we go. Brianna, let me know if this is not audible or if there's any difficulties. And it's just about 3 minutes.
I understand that your asthma symptoms have been just really out of control. So we need to look at some of the ways that you can get healthy and not be back here again.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to come back here. But the doc said, Oscar, my dog, is connected to my asthma symptoms. But the ridiculous part is I've had them for 12 years before, and now it's a problem.
Well, you sound a bit surprised by that, but I'm sure that you've seen some of the material that the clinic gave you about asthma symptoms and managing your asthma, and pets are a really big source of problems in that respect.
Yeah, but let me just clarify. I've seen the materials. I have them. I haven't read them. All I've been doing is taking the medicine, so I don't know that much about this.
Well, wait a second, Sal. What do you mean if you, as an, to be informed about? I'm just really taken aback by that, because I understand from your chart that you have a young baby, a new baby.
Giancarlo, yeah.
And you are very concerned about your health. You want to be there for your baby, and that you've already taken some steps. You've almost quit smoking, which is fantastic. So the next step is to really deal with the dog, deal with the pet. I know it's going to be hard to do that, but there are always people who will adopt animals. I'm sure that you have friends or family members.
This is a little too much. Wait, now. First of all, Giancarlo is taken care of. That's fine. He doesn't have no asthma from the dog. It's just me. I don't have...
It's you that I'm worried about, Sal. It's you that I'm worried about, okay? The symptoms are worse. You've had 2 or 3 major asthma attacks. And do you appreciate how this is a risk to your life, that there are some adults with severe asthma who actually can die as a result of their symptoms? It truly is something to take very, very seriously. I can't emphasize that enough.
So Oscar's gonna make me die. He hasn't made me die in 12 years. And the doctor's saying, oh, I don't know if it's the stress, the finances, the drinking. So what are we doing saying Oscar could make me die? I've had him for 12 years.
Sal, do you understand that what happened 6 years ago or 10 years ago, your asthma is progressively getting worse. You know very well that the puffers, the strength of the medication is getting higher and higher. And there's only so much that can be done with medication alone. You know this.
Well, they can keep giving me more medicine and give me the strongest one, and I'll keep Oscar.
Sal, you're almost on the strongest one. And if Oscar's that important to you, then do you put Oscar higher than your baby, than your wife? Like, that makes no sense to me. Do you understand how important this is?
I understand that. I don't think you get my situation. I've had this dog for 12 years. So I'm not just gonna up and get him out of my house when I don't even know if that's the main thing.
Okay, so I could feel my my stress sort of rising just from the tension in that conversation. Um, I could also really imagine or hear echoes of conversations I've had with folks in the past or overheard about them defending, their use of a certain substance, saying, "I've used this for this many years. It doesn't cause me any problems. Get off my back. Stop. Who are you to tell me that I need to stop this?" Um, I hope that also what struck you might have been the disrespect and the arrogance of the interviewer in that example. That's really something that we don't, and her insensitivity. It's really something we want to avoid. So let's take a look at a different way this conversation could unfold, and then we'll compare the two.
So where you said you'd like to start, Sal, is talking about your asthma, and specifically about your dog and how one is affecting the other.
Yeah, my asthma's just been out of control lately, and my doctor says it might be connected to Oscar.
So what can you let me know, or what do you know about your asthma and the things that affect it or might make it worse?
I've got allergy testing. It's just the dust makes it bad. I thought the smoking was the main thing. That's cut down. And then they said the drinking might contribute to it too. So I got a lot of different things I'm working on. So that's what I know. The drinking, the smoking, and the dust that I got the scratch test for.
Right.
And that's what I know, and that I take the medicine for it.
Okay. And that your pet has never been mentioned as a concern?
No, I've had it for 12 years, and now it's a concern. I don't understand.
Yeah, and I can see that you've already worked hard to make some changes. You've almost quit smoking. You're just down to your last couple of cigarettes, and you're not even smoking those in the house. So your house is totally smoke-free.
Just at work with the boys there.
Yeah, okay. And you have also thought about cutting back on alcohol, and I think you mentioned done a little bit towards that.
I'm a couple down. I used to drink 4 a night. Now I'm down to 3 at least.
Okay. So now, almost like that's not good enough. Like now you have to. Now it's the dog, and and now what's next?
What's next? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, there is certainly a lot of evidence that pets in the home and the dander from their fur can make asthma worse. But I wonder, what are your experiences with Oscar, when he's in the house or maybe sleeping near you or you're around him? What happens with your asthma symptoms?
Well, we keep him clean, like he's cleaned. So all the dander doesn't really make sense, but I have been noticing that sometimes when he comes on the bed or just beside, I wheeze a little bit, but I think it has to do with the hair in my lungs cleaning itself up from the smoking. So I don't know if it's, that's where I'm confused. I don't know how this could be happening.
So it doesn't make total sense to you that it's all Oscar's fault and that, that's the only solution.
But the wheezing is something that I've definitely noticed a little bit.
Okay, so we'll stop there. I think that was enough to really contrast the differences in the approach. And that second conversation was so much less elevated. You really saw how the clinician, the professional, was much more toned down. She was curious. She was interested in the opinions and the perceptions of the patient. And he got much less defensive. He was actually willing to consider and inquire about how the dog might be, or the marijuana might be affecting his asthma. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like you to consider. You can put this in the chat box or just think on your own. But what struck you as notable between the two conversations? What were some of the major differences that stuck out to you? And what did you notice about the difference in the client's responses in the first conversation versus the second?
Comment through going fast. Something notable was how the case manager did a good job of affirming the efforts he had taken so far. Nicholas.
Yeah, highlighting the
Yeah.
steps that he's already taken.
Yes. Ryan says it was an actual conversation instead of a client being talked at.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was less confronted, says Anna. And Sheena says, so much less resistance. He was the expert of his own experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would go so far to say as the case manager provoked his resistance, because it's just part of human nature. Nobody likes being told what they need to do. We automatically have an impulse to resist that and to defend our autonomy and our right to make our own decisions. Yeah. The next two questions are really interesting to think about. Which conversation do you think leaves the client more likely to consider change, more open and feeling like he's ready to make some changes? And finally, ask yourself the tough question: which conversation style do you think today is more typical in treatment and recovery settings? I'd love to hear some thoughts about the last question, especially.
Yeah. As we're waiting, I'll read some of the comments before. Katie says the first conversation, the interviewer was pushing what they thought was right instead of being person-centered. And then Keisha says, yes, acknowledging the positive actions, then guide into the steps and brainstorming. Brooke says the second one, I think, is more common, unfortunately. So she thinks confronting one is more, she meant the first.
Okay. Yeah. I spent 2 years at Recovery Place Seattle, an inpatient detox and 30-day treatment facility. And looking back, I feel really bad and sort of dismayed at the number and frequency and commonality and almost acceptance of the confrontational type of conversations, the dismissiveness of individuals, sort of closing the door on them by saying, well, they're just not ready for change, and so there's nothing that we can do for them. When actually, I wonder if that resistance was provoked, like we saw in the first example. There was a comment about how how the case manager was in the first video. I wondered, why is she letting herself make this more important to herself than it seems to be to the client, to the patient? That's really a recipe for burnout and professional frustration. When you take on a client's issue as yours and get your own emotions and energy wrapped up in it, and it's just so ineffective to try to make it more important to you than it appears to be to the patient. Yeah. Okay, here's a couple of notes that I took in the differences between the two conversations, just to go through this quickly. I think we hit on a lot of them already. But in conversation one, it's definitely a top-down conversation. It's an expert talking to somebody who needs the information from the expert. In the second one, it's much more of a collaborative and exploratory style. The case manager is really curious and interested and not judgmental about the patient's responses. In the first one, she's very insulting to the client. She said, what, you haven't read the information we gave you? What's wrong with you? In the second one, she's respectful of him and affirms the steps he has taken to demonstrate that his health is important. In number one, she really imposes a lot of unsolicited advice and information. In the second one, there's no unsolicited information. She gets to the point where she can use her professional judgment that he's ready to be offered some information, but it's not pushed. And in the first one, besides being argumentative, she prescribes steps. She tells him what he needs to do in a very insensitive way. You need to get rid of your dog. You must have some family members that can take your dog. And in the second one, she just gently explores why and how the client might be ready to think about the impact of the dog on his asthma or the marijuana. And we can see that the outcome is that in conversation one, the client becomes defensive, he shuts down, he's unwilling to collaborate with the case manager at that point. Who would be? And he also really digs in against change. He says, I'm not getting rid of my dog. In the second one, as a result of the case manager's style, he really opens up and he seems willing to continue with the difficult conversation and considering the ways that the status quo might be making his health worse. So a more clinical, so let's look at a second definition of MI, which is more a clinical or a definition for staff. And now that we've got a little bit of background and we've seen some examples, motivational interviewing is a person-centered counseling method for addressing and resolving the common problem of ambivalence about change. A lot of the folks that we work with, they know that they could make some changes. They might be aware that they want to make some changes, yet they're sort of stuck in ambivalence, which is a state of having mixed feelings or uncertainty or contradictory ideas about whether they're ready or they really want to change. So with motivational interviewing, we are centering the person and their experiences and their expert knowledge about themselves to hopefully have them accept our support in working with them to sort of look at their ambivalence and work through it. Here's a few more notes about motivational interviewing, just to be clear. MI is not a full comprehensive treatment approach. It's not the only thing that someone is going to need to be successful with change or to successfully manage their substance use disorder. It's more likely to be very useful and helpful at the beginning before they have really gone all in on their need for change and their willingness to take steps towards healthy change. The target population for MI is people who desire or need to change. They're aware or they have some internal awareness of that it would be good for them to change, and those folks who are ambivalent about doing so or about trying again after an unsuccessful past attempt at change. So the purpose of MI is really quite narrow and focused. It's about helping people who want or need to change, yet those who are somehow stuck in ambivalence, not sure if they're ready or not sure how to take the initial steps. And the purpose is to help those people uncover the motivation they need to get themselves unstuck and move forward, to commit to and take steps towards change. One thing about motivational interviewing that's interesting is that what's not part of MI, what's the stuff we avoid in MI is really what makes it unique among approaches to recovery and conversation styles. In MI, we as the professionals really avoid giving advice or using tips from what worked for us. We avoid prescribing steps or providing direction. We want to collaborate with the individual to figure out the steps that are right for them. We don't force unsolicited information. We don't use persuasion or try to use our emotions or our reasoning or logic to persuade them, to convince them that they need to change. And also, there's not much cheerleading or what's known as bright siding. Look on the bright side in motivational interviewing. Yes, we affirm the strengths and the positive steps that someone has begun to take, but we're not cheerleaders. We're not trying to build them up and just rally them up to continue, because that's actually pretty shallow and doesn't leave somebody with much to work with. Other things that we avoid in MI is doing most of the talking. I didn't point this out, but if you think back to the first videos, in the first video, the case manager does the majority of the talking, definitely more than 50%. In the second one, she does much more listening. And that's what we want, is we want to stimulate the individual to sort of get curious about themselves and to open up and help facilitate that insight building that they can have with us. And we need to ask the right questions and come with the right attitude, but then be aware that we need to keep our mouths shut in order for them to uncover what's inside them. Also, it's really anti-MI to use or remind people of threats of negative consequences if they decide not to change. We need to recognize that it is up to the individual whether they can make the decision whether they change or do not change. Sometimes the decision is to not change, and that is up to them. They are likely already aware of the consequences. If we do think it would be worthwhile to have them reminded of the consequences, we can ask them, what do you think the effects might be? What would be the worst case scenario for you if you continue in this way? Find out what are the consequences that are concerning to them rather than threatening them. And also, we really want to avoid what worked for me will work for you attitude. So you need to listen to me because I've done this. Because what works for one person does not necessarily work for another. And when we perpetuate that sort of attitude, we really set people up for having a lot of frustration when they're not able to be successful in what they've heard should work for them. It's much more effective to collaborate with them and pull out of them what they think might be worth trying for them. They likely know what they're ready for at this time and what might be worth trying. So the point is, the takeaway of these slides here is that all of these techniques, all of these things that we encourage you to avoid with MI, we encourage you to avoid them because they lead to frustration not only for the individual, but also for the professional, for the staff. If we put too much of our own emphasis and our own emotions into trying to convince and persuade and threaten the client to change, we're really setting ourselves up for frustration when that does not happen. And it's also very frustrating for the client to have their selves disrespected, their autonomy not acknowledged. And the effect is that it actually can increase their motivation not to change, just so that they can assert their dignity and their own choice over their lives. So in the next part, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the history, where MI comes from and what it was originally developed for. The founders of MI are two clinical psychologists, William Miller, who's American, and Stephen Rolnick, who's British. And they published their first journal articles about the theories of motivational interviewing in the early 1980s. And their theories, their approaches, their techniques of motivational interviewing really evolved out of observational research that they conducted in the late 1970s on the East Coast of the US with what they termed at the time as inveterate alcoholics. These were mostly men who were considered beyond hope. They were considered by treatment providers as folks that we've tried everything with. They're not going to change. They're going to kill themselves with drinking. And it's really just a waste of our energy to try to help them. So Miller and Rolnick observed and followed these inveterate alcoholics, and studied them as case studies without working directly with the men. But what they were really curious about was what factors influenced them to either resist or to attempt making some healthy changes. So that's how they initially started getting ideas for what could be worth trying out with MI. And so initially, it makes sense that MI was first introduced and utilized to support individuals struggling with substance use disorders. That is where MI first started becoming introduced and spread in the field of addictions. Over the decades and years since, there has been a broad amount of research done on motivational interviewing to determine what works most effectively and what doesn't seem to be so important. And then refinements have been made with MI techniques. But their meta-analyses have been done multiple times, which is looking at 60 or 70 research studies just to analyze what do all of these studies say about MI. And again, the analysis of the research shows that MI increases positive clinical outcomes for folks with behavioral health concerns. And because of that, today now we see MI being adapted for and sort of tooled with a little bit to make it applicable to other areas, other settings. So now there is MI used for the treatment of psychological disorders, for problematic gambling, in primary health care, which I worked in 2020 and 2021, trying to train healthcare workers in MI skills. Also in classroom management, MI with the use of for using with youth and adolescents, and also in the criminal justice system. Repeat offenders, trying to help them identify their motivation for positive change in their lives and steps they're willing to take. So if you do a Google search or an Amazon search of motivational interviewing books, you'll see all sorts of options come up these days now. This book, the big one in purple, Motivational Interviewing, Helping People Change, that is sort of the Bible. That's the original book by Miller and Rolnick, laying out all of the foundation for the approach and explaining the skills. It's now in its third edition, and it's definitely worth getting that. It's pretty approachable and easy to read and follow along with if you're interested in learning more about MI. And then you can see MI in the treatment of psychological problems, in healthcare, in schools, in nutrition and fitness. And there's workbooks that are basically, it's not focused on addictions or healthcare problems or mental health issues, but it's just about helping people get out of ambivalence about whatever topics, wherever they're stuck in life, very broadly. And it's almost like these workbooks are almost like self-help workbooks that people can do MI on themselves or with themselves through some guided exercises. So I'd like to show you this video. It's a clip of William Miller, one of the founders of MI, describing the approach himself. And this is pretty recent. So this is after Bill Miller has been studying and working on and refining MI for several decades. This is his understanding and the way that he describes it today. And this one is just about 2 minutes.
Fundamentally, motivational interviewing involves a change in role, a change in how you think about what you're doing. You're not the expert there to fix the person. You don't have to make the person change. The truth is, in fact, that you can't make a person change. You don't have to be the one to come up with all the good ideas. A person with really good ideas is sitting across from you and may have better ideas than you do. It's not like a competitive sport. It's not like wrestling where you try to defeat and pin and outsmart and outwit the person. It's more like dancing together, moving together, adjusting your movements to the other person. Overall, motivational interviewing is not a directive approach. Neither is it just a following approach. Following is listening to the person and kind of going wherever they go. Motivational interviewing is in the middle, between those two, and we describe it as guiding. If you go to another country and you hire a guide, you don't expect the guide just to follow you around. That's not what you're looking for. Neither do you expect the guide to order you when you will arrive, when you will leave, what you want to see, what you will enjoy, what you're going to do. That's not a good guide either. Good guiding involves good listening, as well as using your own expertise. A good guide will find out where you want to go, what you're interested in, what you're hoping for on this journey, and then help you get there using his or her own expertise, enjoyably, safely, efficiently perhaps. That's the guide's job. Not solely directing, not solely following. There's some of each in it, but it's a blend of those things. This may or may not be the way you've been thinking about your own work, but we invite you to try it out.
Okay, so I really like that video because it's easy to understand. It's very convincing about why MI might be worth learning more about and trying. I really like how he characterizes MI as much more like dancing with a partner, with another individual. Sometimes I lead, sometimes you lead, rather than struggling or wrestling. And also the way he characterizes it as, it's not directive. We're not directing another person in what they need to do to improve their quality of life or make healthy change. We're offering some guidance. And when that's done in the appropriate spirit, it's usually accepted and well received. Okay, so I see that we are about halfway through. And I don't want to rush through, but I'm going to try to do about a slide a minute in order to save time for discussion. So I apologize if this seems like we're rushing a bit, but as I said at the beginning, there's really so much. This is a topic that I would be very happy and could very easily do a half day or a full day training in with the group, but I'm trying to give you the highlights. So let's take a look at the 4 elements of the spirit of MI. This is a quote from Miller and Rolnick from the 1995 edition of their book. MI is most centrally defined not by technique, but by its spirit as a facilitative style for interpersonal conversations and relationships. So they're saying that yes, there's many techniques, there's many skills, there's many tools that are part of MI that you can utilize in conversations. But even more important than those is the spirit with which you bring forth those skills and techniques. If you don't have the spirit, even if you're very, very skilled in using the tools and using the techniques, if you don't have the right spirit, it's not MI, and it's not likely to have the same outcomes. So the 4 elements of the spirit of MI are, as you can see here, are partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. And where all 4 of those overlap is when MI happens. So let's take a look one by one. With partnership, it's really about fostering collaboration and power sharing, so that it's the client's ideas and their subjective experiences that lead the conversation. Some of the keywords you can see here in the center: mutual respect, exploring together, working together, forming an alliance, identifying a shared common goal that you can collaborate and cooperate with. If it's a struggle and the client is unwilling to listen to anything about reducing their alcohol use, that's not a common goal. It's probably not an appropriate topic for an MI conversation. It's partnership is recognizing that the client is an expert on themselves, what they need, and what may work for them. The power sharing part is that while the client is the expert on themselves, the interviewer, the staff, is the expert in the techniques to help resolve their ambivalence, and also in supporting their access to information and resources that may be of assistance to them. That's where the power sharing comes in, and neither can have success without the other. The staff member needs the expertise of the client to form a successful partnership, and the client needs the expertise of the staff. The next part of the spirit is acceptance. And in MI, acceptance simply means that we accept the client and what they bring to the conversation without judgment. Either we try not to be too approving or disapproving. It's important not to, sometimes when we go over the top with our effusive approval, that can actually be interpreted or felt as somewhat disingenuous and inauthentic. And as I said before, it doesn't actually, although it might boost the individual's mood or confidence momentarily, it doesn't actually provide them with much that they can take away and utilize on their own afterwards. So the pieces of acceptance in MI, it's about accurate empathy. Really trying to get curious about and understand how the individual is feeling about this topic and where they're at. It's about recognizing their absolute worth, their inherent dignity and valuable potential just for simply being a human being. It's about respecting their autonomy and recognizing that this is their life. It's within their ballpark to decide whether they're going to change or not to change. Sometimes the decision is not to change at this time, and we need to be able to accept that, as that's where they're at this time. And acceptance is also about affirming the strengths and the positive attributes and steps that an individual has taken. Next is compassion, and in this is some people might sort of wince or feel like, okay, now we're getting into the ooey gooey part. You know, sometimes people say criticism that some people who I think don't know too much about MI say is, well, MI is really just being nice to people. It's actually not. It's much more technical than that. But in MI, we define compassion as acting out of concern for the client's well-being and also in their best interests, as informed and perceived by our professional understanding or our best judgment. We are very careful not to try not to make it explicit to the individual that we have made a professional decision about what is likely best for them or their well-being. But we do want to hold that in mind as the motivator for our concern. So compassion in MI means that the change conversation and collaboration is offered out of concern for the well-being of the client, not for any ulterior motives. That it's in response to the client's needs and their desires, that there's no trickery or manipulation involved with MI, and that we're always giving priority to the client's needs and desires. And finally, the last part of the spirit of MI, the 4 elements, is evocation, which we can really describe as just evocation means uncovering or discovering, drawing something out, calling forth or invoking something that is maybe a little bit buried or that the individual is unaware of or not in touch with. The spirit element of evocation is a strengths-based approach with which we can view our clients and our role with them. So with evocation, we are aware and we hold true that everyone inside themselves holds an impetus or motivation towards survival, good health and well-being, and good quality of life. Everyone has that inside of them, regardless of their current behavior. And our job or our role is to help them access it. become more aware of that and to strengthen and amplify that. We also hold true that every client has what it takes to make some positive change in their life. It's the attitude of, you have inside yourself what we need, and together we will find it. And it's also the difference between evocation or uncovering and drawing forth versus installation, versus trying to implant the motivation in somebody or give them the reasons for change that we think should be sufficient for them to now make positive change, recover from your addiction, stop using. It's uncovering that within them rather than trying to give that to them. So now that we sort of quickly looked at the elements of the spirit of MI, sometimes it's called the mindset or the heart set of motivational interviewing, that we need to sort of scan ourselves and make sure that we're in the right frame of mind. We have the right mindset to practice MI with an individual before we utilize some of the skills. So now that we've talked a little bit about the elements of the spirit, let's look at some of the core skills. And in MI, if you get more into it, you'll learn that MI loves acronyms, just like DBT is another treatment approach that really uses a lot of acronyms. In MI, the 4 core skills, these are always the first four MI skills that are taught to someone who's learning motivational interviewing for the first time, are called ORs. And the acronym stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And yes, the acronym is kind of appropriate. It's kind of cute if we think about, you don't want to be stuck on a boat out in the middle of the lake or on a river without oars, without paddles. You also don't want to get into a change conversation with an individual in need of support without some tools, without something to help you navigate the water and move you forward. And that's what these 4 skills are. So the first one, open-ended questions, there's a distinction between open-ended and closed-ended questions. With open-ended questions, they are questions that we ask that provide a lot of latitude for the other person in how they want to answer or what information they might be interested in providing. They're questions that invite or require a person to think a bit before responding. It's very different from asking someone, how old are you? Do you have an ID card? Do you want to stop smoking? Those are all yes/no questions or closed-ended questions. But with open-ended questions, we're more likely to say, how are you feeling about your use of cigarettes these days? There's always some role for closed-ended questions when we just need to quickly get some fast information or facts. But with open-ended questions, we can really slow down, and it's much more interesting because we can be open to what the individual shares with us. And open-ended questions typically begin with what or how rather than who, why, or when. There's a mistake there. But who, why, and when questions can often be easily answered with a short answer. What or how questions are usually take more. So here's this slide. We won't spend much time on it. We don't have much time, but it's just showing how some closed-ended questions in the yellow box can be changed or reworded to make them open-ended questions, which are much more likely to get a more insightful response and to help us actually learn much more about the other individual. So instead of saying, do you drink? Yes or no. Tell me about you and drinking. When are you going to give it up? I can't see because when are you going to give it up? Your substance of choice. Maybe asking instead, what's your understanding of why we're here together today? Number 4, sorry, I heard some noise there. I think these are misnumbered, but number 4 here, you're here to talk about reducing your use, right? That's assuming, that's a leading question. And we're much more likely to just get the answer that the other person thinks that we want to hear, rather than what they're really thinking or feeling. So instead of saying you're here to talk about reducing your use, right? We could try, what's your understanding of why we're here together today? Instead of asking, do you think you can do it? Yes or no. How confident are you that you can do this? That really sort of provokes somebody to do some introspection. And instead of asking number 6 here, you need to quit using, don't you? A much more MI phrasing of that question might be, what do you think some of the benefits of quitting might be for you? That's a really skillfully worded question that actually gets the person to state themselves what some of the advantages of making a healthy choice and making a healthy change by reducing their use would be for them. They're going to be saying, you're basically getting them to verbalize themselves their reasons for quitting or reducing their use. All right, let me try to go back to full screen. So after open-ended questions, the next part of the acronym is A for affirmations. And as we've mentioned a couple times here, folks mentioned in the chat box also, that affirmations highlight the positive and acknowledge that which is good or going well for the individual. This part really overlaps with compassion and empathy from the MI spirit. And a quote here is, I'm going to have to make it smaller to see the whole thing. Oops. Positive. I can't see it all. Can you read the quote in italic, Brianna? I'm sorry.
So it says, affirmations highlight the positive and acknowledge that which is good or going well with an individual. Affirming overlaps with both compassion and empathy. Positivity is rhetorical. People are more likely to spend time with, trust, listen to, and be open with people who recognize them and affirm their strengths.
Yes, so that's the reason for affirmations is that when we bring that positivity to difficult conversations, to conversations about ambivalence and change and embarking on difficult goals, people are much more likely to sort of relax and let their defenses lower and be willing to trust us and to listen to us and to collaborate with us because we're letting them know we recognize you have a lot of strengths and a lot of good things going for you that you can utilize. So there's some examples of affirmations here in the box. Affirmations typically begin with you or your. You've been working really hard and you've had some successes. You've come a long way from where you were. You kept all of your appointments and you've even been on time. You're really proving how strong you can be. We want with affirmations to make sure that they are genuine, that that they don't sound phony, that we're really being observant and able to highlight something that is true and meaningful within the person's character or their behavior. And a really important thing about affirmations is that they are not praise. There's a big distinction between affirmations and praise. Praise can often come across as top down, as someone in a superior position, sort of giving a pat on the head to the good and obedient a person in the lower position. Praise can come across, especially to someone struggling with behavioral issue, as patronizing or condescending. So praise often starts, instead of, affirmations start with you or your or you've. Praise typically starts with I. And so that centers the positive comment on our perception, on our interpretation, on our view of the individual, rather than just recognizing their positive trait. So in the box here, we can reword certain statements to change them from praise into affirmations. Rather than "I'm proud of you," how about "You have a lot to be proud of"? "I think you've done great so far." Just take out the "I think." You've done great so far. It doesn't matter that I think this, it's a fact. You have done great so far. Likewise, "I know you're working really hard." You're working really hard. Which one sounds more impactful and easier to accept? "I believe you can be strong," or "You can be strong." Just get rid of the "I." Just keep it focused on the other individual. Next, moving along to the R in ORS. This is, I would say, of the 4 core skills, the open-ended questions and affirmations, those are pretty easy to understand and wrap our head around and start putting into practice. Reflections do take a little more skill and practice to make a good reflection. But a description of reflections is that they are a response to something that the client says. So we listen to what the client says, and then we respond to that statement by making a guess at what the client means or is feeling. And so we might be restating or rephrasing something that the client told us, but with the addition of trying to get a little bit deeper in their meaning or in the feeling that goes with that statement. Reflections really have the effect of helping the client feel understood and seen, validated, and encouraged. And this is very effective in getting someone to feel comfortable continuing to go even deeper, to continue letting you know sort of some of what's going on in their mind. Yeah, as the middle part says, actively listening, being, shutting off our instinct to do a lot of the talking or to offer advice or to share our own experiences, shutting that off, and instead just really slowing it down, actively listening to what the person is saying, and then offering them a reflection back on what we think they're feeling and trying to communicate can have a really powerful effect. And especially for individuals who don't have a lot of experience with being respected or listened to and validated. I know that if you try making a reflection for somebody that's not used to feeling validated or listened to, you're going to notice the difference in how they respond and how they react to your reflection. So here's a couple of examples of reflections. A is what you might hear from the resident or from the client, and B is an example of a reflection, something that you would reflect back to them based on their statement. So the client says, "I feel nervous around other people, and a drink helps me relax." The clinician might say, "You like feeling comfortable around others, and alcohol is something that makes that easier." We're not telling or informing the person that alcohol is helpful for their social anxiety. They've already told us that. They're aware of that. We're just letting them know, we hear you, we respect your perspective on that. And this kind of statement has the effect of encouraging the person to feel comfortable opening up more and letting us get a little peek at the way that the world looks to them and their relationship with alcohol. The next one, the resident says, "The job just really takes all my energy. A little bump makes it possible for me to get through the shift. It doesn't even get me high. I'm not doing it to get high or feel good. I just need the energy to get through my shift. Aren't you happy I have a job?" And a reflection to that might be, it's important to you to not be tired at work. That's really what the person is saying. They're telling you, it's just a little bit. I'm not doing it to get high like I used to. they might be there might be some self manipulation or gaslighting themselves there, but what they're trying to communicate to us is that they need to not be tired at work. They need energy at work. So we reflect back to them, what I hear you saying is it's important to you to not be tired at work. When we can make a non-judgmental reflection like that, the person is much more likely to explore other strategies to have enough energy to get through their shift, rather than shutting down and just getting defensive about their use of a little bump of whatever. And the last one, the individual tells us, sometimes I just feel like giving up. I've been trying so hard to do everything right, but it doesn't seem like it'll ever be enough for her. I can never please her. There's a lot of feeling, there's a lot of emotion and frustration, and being at wit's end there in that statement. So if we want to sort of encourage the person to get more in touch with their emotions there and explore that, a good reflection might be, you'd like her to recognize how hard you've been working and give you a little credit. I hope you can hear in those examples how any of those reflections to the initial statements would likely be met with a feeling of relief from the individual, from the resident, feeling like, yes, you understand me. You're a person who's worth it for me to talk to and open up with, because you get it, and I'm willing to continue this conversation. Okay, there's another couple tips about reflections, but we'll move on to summaries, the S and Ors. So summaries are really, we can think of summaries as just sort of a collection of reflections in a way. Summaries are usually about 3 to 5 sentences that sort of sum up or reinforce what has already been discussed in the conversation up to a certain point. And when we offer summaries, it not only demonstrates that we've been listening carefully, but it also checks that that our understanding is accurate, and it provides the individual an opportunity to clarify or correct us if we've been wrong in our understanding. And it also is a great way. 2 other things that summaries are great for is it's a great way to gently remind someone of the next steps that we've already discussed, that maybe the things that they've committed to already, or their intentions, reminding them of that. And also to sort of gently shift the conversation or move the conversation forward. It's not unique to MI. This can happen in any kind of conversation where we might feel like the other person is sort of obsessing, or they've gotten stuck on a certain topic. If we can give it a pause and summarize what we've heard them say and what we've heard their what they think their next steps might be, summaries can really be sort of a good way to wrap up the topic neatly with a bow and shift direction or move on to another topic. So we don't have the full conversation, but this is an example of a summary, and you can get the idea of what has been discussed previously. So this is towards the end of the conversation about what somebody needs to do in terms of their substance use in order to be able to spend time with their child again. The stress of your divorce has gotten you off track. You really want to give it up again, give up your use again, but you've been struggling. Being able to be with your child again is really important to you, and you'll do whatever it takes to make that possible. You've committed to attending 2 meetings tomorrow and then every day next week. Did I get all that right? So all of these statements, it's not ideas or things that the interviewer is telling to the person. It's reflections back from what the person has already told them. It's really useful to highlight when we hear what's really important to the individual. So in this case, it's doing whatever it takes to be able to see their child again. So we're going to remind them of that. That is your primary motivation. And we're also taking this opportunity to remind them of the next steps. they've come up with, that's their idea of what would be helpful for them, attending some meetings. And then finally we end with, did I get all that right? As again, showing respect for the other person and saying, I might not have understood everything correctly, so this is an opportunity for you to correct me or clarify anything if I got it wrong. All right, there's a video that I encourage you to search for on YouTube on your own. It's called Motivational Interview ORS Annotated. It's a very good example of a motivational interviewing conversation, and little subtitles come up on the screen, not subtitles, but little labels come up on the screen when the interviewer is using one of the 4 OR skills. So you know, okay, this is an example of a reflection. This is an example of an open-ended question or an affirmation, and you get to see all of that in action. And then these 2 yellow slides are different tools that we can use with motivational interviewing skills. I imagine some of you have some experience with either the readiness ruler or decisional balance exercises. Those slides are in there also with the steps, how you use them, and the conversations that go along with these tools. But what I would really like to spend time doing now for our last 10 minutes or so is talking with you, hearing from you, your responses to some of these questions. I'd like to know if any of you feel that you currently do use MI techniques or approaches with your residents in your recovery residences or among staff. If yes or if no, can you think of any types of situations in your residences where you think MI skills might be helpful, where they might be worth trying to apply? And whichever any of these questions you feel like responding to. If any of you have any ideas or suggestions for basically using MI in recovery residences. Recovery residences are not exactly, treatment centers or treatment settings, but they are very important environments for folks in recovery. When and with what type of topics could motivational interviewing techniques be used? And finally, does anyone have any concerns about using MI approaches in recovery residences? Any ideas about, well, we probably wouldn't want to use MI in this type of a situation, or I don't think it would work very well with this?
Mm-hmm. I see a couple of comments here. Anna says, I try, but I'm not very good at it. I try asking open-ended questions.
That's a very good step. Even
Yes.
just if you can just get open-ended questions and increase your use of open-ended questions, that is going to make a huge difference just there. So I give you props for trying.
Yeah, and Brooke says, I don't work at a facility, but use it a lot working with injured workers hesitant to go back to work/life.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for letting us know.
In my personal experience, it takes a lot of concentration when you're first starting it. Like, you have to be really intentional about listening. And what I would do is I would always kind of prepare that mindset before I would go talk with someone. Because it does take a lot of listening and a lot of practice and being intentional about it until you get comfortable with it.
That's right. I'm glad you shared that, because it can seem almost like too much to do. We're supposed to have a conversation and listen to somebody and remember, these skills and how to use them. Yeah. But what I always tell people is that if you just start trying to apply some of the skills and techniques, I trust that you're going to see the benefit. You're going to see the positive effect that these skills have and how they improve the quality of conversations. And that itself is going to give you the motivation to continue. And once you really are intentional and seek opportunities to implement and utilize some of these techniques and skills, they do sort of start to become just part of your regular way of communicating.
Mhm.
And that's sort of a beautiful thing, because although, you know, these are skills and techniques meant to help people get out of ambivalence and to amplify their motivation for change, these are also just very good skills for effective communication, you know, in all areas of our lives, even with, you know, the checkout, the cashier at the grocery store. It's going to make a more meaningful interaction.
Mhm. There's some more comments here. Stephanie says it's hard to motivationally interview someone if they're actively in crisis or unwilling to listen. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Recognized.
Rachel says, or if they don't want to talk, she agrees. Marcia says, I do use MI, but I'm seeing some of my mistakes as watching this. Man says, very refreshing. It's not magic to make somebody do something, but help somebody to find out what they really want. I remembered my embarrassing experience when I practiced. Yeah.
Yeah, I can say that with the right spirit, with the right mindset, you can't really do any harm with MI. So even if you feel like you've made a mistake or you've stumbled over it, give yourself credit for trying, and know that it's I can't think of many situations where you can actually cause any harm with doing any of these techniques unskillfully.
Sabrina says the program I work for is based on building off clients' strengths and their own personal goals, letting them lead us on how their desires align with these goals.
Great. So I think I probably already, with Sabrina's program, that MI is probably already taught and integrated into the strengths-based approaches. Okay, thanks everyone for sharing, including Brianna. I hope that this has been, you feel like you've gotten a good introduction, maybe clarified some things about what motivational interviewing is and is not, and also how it can be utilized to help facilitate constructive change conversations. There's a slide in here with some recommended books and workbooks, the ones that I think are the very best, and also websites. The motivationalinterviewing.org website just has lots of free tips and techniques and skills. Also draft sort of like sample scripts that you can read. The buildmotivation.com is actually a for-profit MI training platform. It's online, and it's not cheap. I think it's about $500 for 20 hours of online courses, but I've gone through that, and it's one I would recommend. You can also just search on YouTube motivational interviewing demonstrations or motivational interviewing skills, and lots of videos pop up. So in conclusion, I'd like to just encourage you to try using one or two MI skills that we discussed today in conversations with residents, family members, or friends. And I know that you'll see the power of MI for yourself. I really trust that it will be enough to convince you that this is worth looking into a bit more. And with that, I will turn it back to Brianna, but you're very welcome to email me with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Brianna is going to send out a PDF of all the slides, and you can feel free to share them among your networks. And also a video recording of today's presentation is going to be available on the Walker website via YouTube.
Yes.
Thank you all for your time. And there we go.
Yes.
I'm turning it over to Brianna.
Thank you. And I just wanted to apologize. We had capacity for about 500 people, and there's some error that was going on with Zoom. So Jason got on the phone and it didn't get resolved to the end. So if you know someone who is trying to log on today and they didn't, let them know that I will be sending out an email to absolutely everyone who registered today with the recording. I'll have that posted today along with the slides, and yeah, and that we're really sorry about that. But thank you everyone for being here, and thank you so much, Garrett, for
Yes.
your presentation. I'm also going to send out a short survey to your email. And if you have time, a couple minutes, it will just be about 5 questions or so. If you wanted to fill that out, that just helps us improve how we can get better. So we appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
I have a slide, Brianna, about the upcoming webinars,
Yes.
if you want to plug those.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that. So Thursday, May 26th, we have de-escalation training. I don't know if any of you guys attended the mental health first aid training that we had, but Deanna was actually our presenter for that. So this one should be good, especially those in recovery houses. Different techniques you could use to de-escalate someone. And then on June 24th, we have the stages of change, understanding the framework and primary tasks for recovery residences. So yes, so this kind of goes along with Garrett's presentation today, where he's going to go into greater depth about the stages of change.
So thank you, everyone. I sort of feel like it's very flattering that there was such interest and interest, in attending this webinar, that we maxed out capacity. But I'm very happy that it's been recorded and will be accessible for everyone, and everyone will get the slides.
Yeah,
and maybe Walker will invite me back to do this again next year.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thanks. Any last questions or comments? Thank you. It was great. Very helpful. Yeah, you're welcome, you guys.
Corrine asked, how do we sign up for these trainings?
Yes, and I think that was only a couple, and off the top of my head, we do have a couple more. So please take some time if you want to look at, if you go to www.walker.org, I'll put that in the chat right now. And I'm going to be posting some upcoming ones in June as well. So I'll probably do that in the next couple of days or so. But walker.org, under events, you can register for it. Or if you're signed up for under our email for our listserv, those get sent out monthly. So I can add everyone to our listserv that's in this meeting today, and you can cancel it if you want to, or if you want to just let me know in the chat if you don't want to be added to it. But we usually send those out monthly as well.
All right, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day and enjoys the sun. It's bright and sunny and warm looking here in Olympia. I'm eager to get outside and feel that for myself after so much rain. I hope to see you all again soon, and thank you, Brianna, for facilitating today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks, Brianna.
Yeah, thank you for coming.